Alright, hi everybody. Switch over. Alright, hope you all had a great weekend. Mine was pretty good. A little busy, but I can't complain too much about that. Okay, well let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're working on a Twitch interactive game in Unity. So far, we don't really have a lot of we do have a little bit to show, but basically it just creates the tiles that we'll be using, and I was about to make the algorithm to figure out the matching pairs. So if you don't know what kind of game this is, it's usually called either memory or concentration. But basically, each of these tiles has a picture associated with it, and they're all turned over so you can't see the picture, and then people would guess to like just reveal two tiles, and if it's a match they get a point. So we're gonna be making a twist on that, but where Twitch users can guess which tiles they want to reveal, and also each tile will have a Twitch user's logo as its image. And there'll be some more fun things that users will be able to do with their points that they might accumulate while playing. But we've got a while to go before we get there. Okay, so one thing I said I was going to do was last week I wanted to make it so this database initializer would not update, because we really just need it to run this on create, and in order to do that you just have to set enabled to false. So it will still run the on create, but it won't run on update. So I could just show that. We look down in the entity debugger. Now does it even show? Okay, well I guess yeah, the database initializer doesn't even show up in this list anymore. Okay, well I should make sure that it actually ran that code. Well, I guess it did because we didn't get any errors. So, but just in case. I noticed in my videos that the music was very quiet, so I turned it up a little bit, but tell me if the balance is if it's drowning out my voice now. Okay, it seems. Oh, yeah. Okay, so onCreate did run. That's good to see. Let me look at quick. Okay. Sorry, I thought that. I just want to make sure that my microphone doesn't mess up again. Alright, so now we need to go ahead and get back to the tile pairer. So this, well, yeah, we had just barely started it, but basically we want it to be able to take a list of tiles and then basically assign them an image so that each has a pair. So hopefully this won't be too much of an issue. Alright, so I know I did a little bit of setup here. So we have a list of tile pairs. Okay, and so I have a list of random numbers. Oh yeah, so we need to, whenever we do something with the multi-threading, we have to really think about how we'll handle random numbers. Because random numbers have to be ran in sequence, obviously. So you have to be careful that you keep track of them so that you aren't calling them from multiple threads at the same time. Oh yeah, that reminds me, I wanted to copy over some code from another project for that, but I'll take care of that when the time comes. Alright, so I think we can go ahead and start on the algorithm now. So I did a bit, we did the pseudocode last time, so basically while there's an unpaired tile, we want to try and find a pair for it. So if there's at least 2 unpaired tiles, we basically just pick 2 tiles from the list and then pair them. But then if there's only 1 unpaired tile, then it's going to be just an odd tile out and it won't have a pair. And that would only happen if you have an odd number of an odd dimension. So if it's 5 by 5, then it'd be 25, obviously. So okay. Oh yeah, so I was trying to remember why I made this a list. And it's just because you can kind of use a native array as a pointer to this random sequence. So this isn't actually going to be a list, it's just going to contain one random sequence, but in order to return this sequence to another job when this is done, we have to store it in this kind of single element native array. So that's why I had this in array. And then so this list of pairs is what we're going to output. And then the list of tiles is our input. So yeah, that's basically all we need. So I guess first we need to create a native list of tiles, because we'll need to remove tiles from the list once we've used them already. So yeah, we'll just have a private native list and it will just be a temporary list only for this job. This will be unpaired tiles. Okay, and so to make a temporary list, it's just like if it was outside of a job, except you can set the allocator to temp here. And it wants to know its initial capacity, which will just be the tiles length. Okay. And then we're going to want to add every tile to this list. So for 0i less than tiles length, oh, okay, or we can just use the add range. I wonder if that, oh yeah, okay, so it works with a native array, so that's easier. Okay, let's see. Okay, but yeah, now that I'm looking at this, we really don't even need to have this list be a list of tiles. We actually just need it to be a list of indexes which point to the tiles, because that's what we're actually going to store in the tile pair. So let's change this to just integer. And now we can't add range, so I'm going to go back to that for loop. Tiles length. And we'll really just call unpaired tiles I equals I. I wonder, well, we already gave an initial capacity, but I wonder if this will throw an error if it does, I can just call .add I, but okay, so the next thing we need to do is pick out a random value. Well, I guess first we have to see how many tiles are in here. So if unpaired, or we need to do, yeah, while unpaired tiles dot length is greater than or equal to 2. So now we just need to pick 2 tiles at random and then pair them. So I think I'll make another function here, which will just be choose random. We don't really even need to pass anything to it. So, okay. I think the best way to do this, I guess we'll just make it simple at first. So index will be next integer, and I think we can give it, yeah, minimum and maximum. So the minimum is 0. I wonder if this max is inclusive or not. Well, I assume we'll find out pretty quickly. Just do something like that, and then we need to grab the item out of the list before we remove it. Okay. And then this remove at swap back is just kind of a faster version of the remove at from C#, or just a normal list. What it does is you can only use this if you don't care about the order of items in the list, because it will just grab the last item in the list and put it into the spot that you're removing, and then take one off the size. So it does rearrange items, but it's a lot faster. Oh, and then this should also return an integer. Not sure why this is gray. Maybe just because it's not called, but oh yeah, so it just wants me to remove it because it's not called anywhere. So we can just, here we'll just call pairs, add new tile pair, and then A is choose random and B is choose random. This should actually just be called tile pair, not tile pairs. Okay, so here we check to make sure that the unpaired tile's length is greater than or equal to 2. So now we just need to make sure that if unpaired tile's length is 1, that we add the last tile as an unpaired tile, which I think I'll represent that as just being a tile pair where A and B are equal. Alright, we don't really even need to remove it from the list, because right here we'll just dispose. And since this unpaired tiles is just a very temporary native list, we'll dispose of it here. And again, when working with these native lists and the Unity jobs are data-oriented code, you have to always dispose of it yourself, otherwise it will complain to you. Okay, so I think we did everything. Let me look at the pseudocode. Yeah, so we just assign the tiles. So here, while there's an unassigned pair, this is just saying let pair be an unassigned pair and image be an image to assign, and then if there's at least one unused image, we set image to one randomly chosen, otherwise set image to just any random image. So we're going to be kind of doing something similar. Alright, so now we need to decide. Well, I guess the list of images is basically just a list of integers. I was trying to think, like, does this need to just be an integer that's just like num images, or probably having this list is better in case some images get blacklisted, but we're not going to remove them from all the images in the game or something. So it's probably safer just to pass this array, even though we'll need to modify it. And then this list is passed from here. Okay, and then also, at this point, we're going to actually change tiles. Which is a little interesting. Sometimes it can be hard to actually change data from an IJob. It'd be easier if this was, well, if we could do this in parallel, but we can't. So probably what I'll do I think the best way, probably the easiest way to do this, it would be to have a third job which would read from a assigned image array and then just insert it into the entity data. So then we need to index the array. I guess we can do that by tile position. So we don't even need pass the tiles really to here. We can just kind of pass an integer for the number of tiles. And then here, we don't need this data either, but we'll need a list to, this will be right only. Assigned, I guess I'll just call it assigned, if I can spell, images. And then this will be possible images, just to differentiate between those two. And then again, this is the pairs that we were passed from this other job. So yeah, while pairs, okay, this will be so while pairs length is greater than 0. I could make this a stack or a queue, which is kind of more like what this is used for. So maybe I will go ahead and do that. Yeah, so instead of add, we just say, oh, well, that was wrong because this is the temporary list. So this would be and then instead of add, I just like to use in queue or on queue. And the queue is really just like a list, except it's made for adding and removing objects. So I might as well just use it. So again, well, this is now a native queue. And I think it has an easier way to call this. So pairs. Yeah, try DQ. You can just call out. So yeah, this will just return a boolean if, or return true if there's any item in the queue, and then it will store that item here. Well, return false if the queue is empty. Alright, so now what do we do? Okay, so I kind of worded this weird because I really should loop through all pairs first. And then we look through the images. So I guess I need to make a list of all unused images. So again, I think we'll have a temporary I just realized that since this is temporary, I really shouldn't store it there. This is... So yeah, now we'll just pass that in here. I think if I stored it in the actual structure, it might cause some weird issues, so... Again, we'll just have temporary native list, which will just again be an integer. Oops. So this will be unused images. Sorry, I had a brain fart there. So new native list. And I guess, yeah, the number of images will just be possible images length and temp. And I'll just go ahead and add this here so I remember to dispose of it. So yeah, we'll have another for loop where we just add everything to the unpaired. Actually, this time, since possible images and unused images are both integers, we can just add range. Alright. So now we got a list of unused images. So according to the pseudocode, now we see if there's one unused image, we just choose something random from that list. I really should rename this as choose random and remove, just to make it really obvious that it removes that entity or that item from the list. This will be just images. Oops. Accidentally pasted there. Oh right, and so now I need the pointer to the random number generator. Oh, which reminds me, after I've used the random number generator through here, I need to set it back. Or I can never remember if I call next integer like this, will it, I can't remember if it will update the random sequence in this array or if I'll need to set it back again. I guess we'll test it out here. But if I run it and I see that the random sequence is just giving me the same number over and over again, I know that it's not saving the value in the sequence. Okay, so anyway, this is fine. And then I also need to be able to choose a random number from a native array, which we'll use when the list is empty. And this time we won't remove the item from the array. We'll just basically get the image. So if unused images is greater than 1, then we'll want to assign this image to both of these tiles in this pair. Private. I think I'll make another function for that. Assign image And then I can just call assigned images pair A image. Now if A and B are the same, which basically means this pair, or yeah, this tile wasn't paired with anything, then we can see it just assigns this image to the same index twice, which is fine. So yeah, it works automatically for that unpaired tile, which is good to see. Okay, so assign image pair and then choose random and remove. Then otherwise we can call assign image, then just choose random on all possible images. Now what do we do if there's no, well, if there's no possible images, then the game should catch that even before we get to this point. So I don't think I need to worry about that. Okay, so do I need to do anything else? Okay, so I need to assign the image to the pair. And then remove the pair from the unassigned tiles, which we did this algorithm differently because we just loop through every tile pair. And then tag the image as used, which we did basically by removing it from this list. So now I just need to make the job to take these assigned images and actually store that information on the entity. So to do that, I'm going to use a different type of job. Let's call this, I guess, assign job, which will be a IJob for each. And you pass it the type of some entity, which will be tile here. And what this does is it loops through every entity with this tile. Sorry about that. And we'll pass it a read only of native list integer. Oh, I forgot the public keyword. This will be assigned images, and the indexes in here is the tile position. So that means tile.image equals assigned images tile.position. One thing I just noticed is that this pair is actually tiles index. Hi, Ixie. I don't know why I'm Jesus, maybe because of my my hair. It's not long enough though. But thanks for stopping by. How are you doing today? Yeah, so anyway, these pairs were storing the index in this array, which might not be their position, so I'm trying to think about how to deal with that. Probably what I can do is, again, just take a list of the tiles, a native array of tiles, and then just store their position instead of the index. Is bored? Good to hear that you're doing okay. Hopefully maybe I can help with the boredom. I think that's probably the best thing to do. Although, I guess we can always... Maybe I'm trying to solve something that's not really an issue, because the number of tiles is always just every position, so... Yeah, so I think making an issue where there's not one. Okay, so I think this is all pretty good, but of course we need to test it. Mouse scroll wheel is starting to fail, I think. So now we have to do basically bookkeeping code to call all these jobs. Gonna get motivated for your computer science project. It's supposed to recreate a binary system in Python. Make your own ASCII table. Okay. Sounds pretty... Sounds like it could be interesting, but yeah, a little... trying to say, I guess, manual labor. I've never worked much in Python, but I've always wanted to try it out. So, to get these jobs to run, it's pretty simple. You basically just create them. So new tile pair worker. And then you just call this schedule function, which Unity adds onto any or structure of IJob. And you don't have to pass anything, but I'm going to pass a job dependency, which will tell Unity to only run this job when any job associated with these dependencies are complete. And the schedule function will also return some dependencies. So, for example, if we want the next job to run afterwards, we would call new file, let's see, file image assignment worker. I don't know if I like this name that much because I have this assignment job. Let's call this a store data worker. And then we just call schedule on this. And since I pass it the dependencies that were returned from the tile pair worker, Unity will only run this job once this one is complete. Trying to get oh, it's a lot like C# but simpler syntax. Yeah, that's kind of what I've noticed from looking at Python code. It's kind of like Lua, which I do have a lot of experience with. Have I tried any other languages? A few others, yes. I used to program a lot in Java, but not really anymore. And then I do some in Lua and C++. And then a couple smattering in other languages. But those are the main ones I work with. So yeah, so that's the power of these dependencies. And you always want to return the last dependency from this onUpdate function, because Unity will basically pass this on to the next component system. So that way the jobs will all run in sequence. But obviously, if we just call this, these data fields would never be filled. So before we schedule, we have to set all those fields. So the number of tiles. So yeah, we got to figure out how to fill all these out. The pairs is kind of simple. We'll just create. Okay, so yeah, this is a native queue, and there's some kind of... So basically for this native queue, well, for some data... Wait. Okay, yeah, so maybe I'll do the same thing for this. But like here, I'd want to dispose of this list after this worker is complete. And Unity has this handy tag called deallocate on job completion, where it will automatically dispose of this list after this job finishes. But it only works for native arrays as far as I'm aware, unless they've changed it recently. So if you have anything else like this, you kind of just need to keep it around in your actual component system and take care of clearing it every time this runs. Which is not really that big of a deal, but Just some more bookkeeping you have to keep or be aware of. So we have a native queue of tile pairs. I'll just call this, I don't know, tile pair queue, that's fine. And then we'll also have a native array of integer, and this will just be assigned images. We looked at Lua source code is the end, like the second bracket in C++. Pretty much, Lua is a lot more fluid in the way that you can define like blocks of code. But yeah, it's basically like the ending bracket. Okay, so I want to create these objects on the onCreate function, which we can just schedule this override function here. And we'll set the allocator here to persistent because we're basically going to keep this around forever. What's it not like? Oh yeah, this is supposed to be a native list actually. Okay, I don't know why that error popped up, but it's actually helped me out there. Oh, because a native array, you have to give it the length on construction time, so that makes sense. Alright. Okay, so the other thing we have to do here now is, since we've assumed control over these arrays, we have to destroy them ourselves too, so luckily that's easy. Unity provides an onDestroy callback, so just here you'd call dispose. Okay, so now we can just pass this. Oh, well, actually, I'm just going to clear these at the beginning of every call just to make sure there's no junk data in them. And you can do this even though these jobs run asynchronously on a different thread. You can guarantee that they'd be completed by the next frame, so they'd always be done by the time onUpdate's called. So yeah, pairs equals tile pair queue. So we got that. Now to get the number of tiles, we've got to get a handle on the board component, or we could also just get it from the number of tiles. Trying to figure out how I'd want to do this. I guess we first need to figure out when is this going to run, because that will tell us if we'd already have to query for the board or the number or all the tile entities. So, this board initializer just calls an just adds the initialized tag to the board. So again, there's a couple ways we could handle this. Either we can add another tag to the tiles or the board saying that everything's been randomized, or we could create an event entity and then listen for that. There's drawbacks to both, so I'm just trying to think in my head which one would be better for this. I guess since we're going to already need the board, because we'll have to know how many tiles are on it, it might be better if I just add a component to the board that either requests for the tiles to be randomized, or have some component that says that the board has been randomized. so I guess we'll go back here. Public structure request. Pair randomization. Yeah, I think this is okay. Yeah. This kind of question is usually the most difficult part of using the data-oriented programming I've found so far in Unity, because it's a lot different than the more classical game flow programming. And again, there's usually a lot of ways to do it, so you kind of think of the best way. Maybe we can go ahead and just make an event entity just to kind of show how it's done. Let's see, we already have this, the tile game object creator. Oh wait, that is different. Oh, yeah, I don't want the mono behaviors. So the simple board. Oh, okay, so it already just creates the tiles. I was gonna say, do we already have an object that waits to create the tile events? But no. Or not tile events, tile entities. Okay, so we'll just do it kind of the easy way for now, but we might have to change it later. So we have request. Also, yeah, because later on we'll only want to call this once we're sure that we have all the images, so. But yeah, having it all depend on this component kind of makes the game pretty flexible, because all we have to do to change when this algorithm runs is change when this component gets added to the board. So that's one good thing about it. So now we just need to create an entity query that will just query for our board that has the database or that request component on it. Okay, now I'm having second thoughts if this is how I want to do it, because now we're gonna have to delete that component at some point, or this will keep running, and I don't really want this code to do that, or this object to do that. So I think I might use a separate separate event system. That won't be that difficult to do, so let's just go ahead. So again, I'll have the state. We'll still keep this because we'll still need it. I'll just create a message by component data, and any component with this message will get destroyed at the beginning of the next frame, or probably the end of the next frame would be better, or the end of this frame, I mean. Let's just call message destroyer. Set up namespace here. And this will be, well, I guess it won't be a job component system because we're not going to run any jobs. We're just going to be destroying entities. And one thing about using this Oh wait, I don't want constructor. This event driven I guess code archetype is that when you create an event, it does create an entity, which isn't really too expensive, but you want to be sure that you don't do this like every frame, because then that does something called data churn, which just means Unity has to move around a lot of data all the time. So it can slow things down a little bit, but really, how often are we going to create new boards? So I don't think that will be an issue with this event. Alright, so before we figure out when onUpdate will be called, let's first create the onCreate function. And we know we're going to want to have a query for the messages. So we'll get entity query, and this one's going to be pretty simple, so this be component type how do you do this? Component type read only message, and technically this is read only because we're not going to be reading these messages, but we are going to be destroying the entities they're attached to. Yeah, there we go. And then we'll want to require for update. And then on update, we can just call a post update. Actually, what I want to do, I want this to happen at the beginning of the next frame. So I'm gonna get a handle on the begin initialization entity command buffer system, which I can't remember if I explained entity command buffers before, but basically it holds a list of, I guess, commands corresponding to the entity system. So like either create or destroy an entity, add a component, or things like that. And it executes them all at once at some other time. And the reason you want to do that is because usually whenever you call these commands, it slows down like all the different jobs that are running. So you want to try to do a whole bunch of it at once, so it only has to do all that, I guess, bookkeeping at one time. And we can also leverage this to have these components be destroyed at a certain time in the game's run cycle, which for us will happen at the beginning of the initialization phase. So I'll actually just delete that because it's a little easier just to not have to type out that huge class every time. In order to get a handle on it, we'll just call the world get or create system. So it'll give us this command buffer system, and then on update called buffer system oh yeah, so we actually have to create the buffer here. And then buffer dot destroy entity, and I think I can pass it an entity query, which just means it will destroy every entity in this query, so we don't have to deal with getting all the entities out of this query ourselves. Okay, and I think that's all I have to do. So yeah, pretty simple here. I guess I'll have this run at the presentation, or during the presentation system group, and we'll want to make sure that the presentation system group doesn't spawn any events. Because if they do, well, I guess it doesn't really matter. But if it spawns an event, then it might somehow get past the message destroyer and run in 2 frames, which can cause like some unintended effects. But I'm not going to worry about it too much. Okay, so then the simple board initializer, instead of adding it to the board, I'm just going to have another, or make it create another entity, which would be that type, or the type of the message. So this would be the event archetype. Create archetype. I'll pass it 2 types here. One would be the message, and then the other is that request. Oh, yeah, it's type of, not just type. Request tile pair randomization. And then we'll just create the entity. We don't even have to change any data on it. So create entity. Okay, pretty simple. And then again, we'll go back to the tile pairer, and we'll want to only run when an event of that type is running. So we don't really have to ever get a handle on the event, so we can kind of just throw away that query. So require for update, get entity query, and then we'll just want a type of request tile randomization. I guess I should call or tell it the game that it's read only. And I'm sorry if you guys can hear that buzzing. I don't know. I guess one of my neighbors has decided to do lawn work at this time. Okay, so yeah, this is again, we just create an entity query for the specific tile pair, and then we don't really need to ever get this entity, so we don't have to really keep the query around, but we can just pass it to this require for update. Okay, but again, this doesn't really I went down that whole rabbit hole to try to get the board so we could know how many tiles are in the game. Let's see. Yeah, we don't really ever need to get all the tile entities until here, but this won't even use it wouldn't even use like a query or the tiles, so we don't really need to have a query for tiles. But maybe, probably. So I think I will go ahead and try to count all the tile entities, because we're going to have to do an IJob for each here for all the tiles. Well, okay. So the thing is, we don't really want to count all the tiles, we just want to count all the positions. And there'll be a position for every value on the board. So, yeah, sorry for rambling, I keep going back and forth how I want to do it in my head. But I think we'll just do an entity query for the board. And this one we will want to store. So get entity query. And this will just be a component type, read only for the board. And we will want to require for update. Because I guess we wouldn't want to run this if there was no board. That's the wrong key there. Okay, so let's... Another way we can do this, they have something called a singleton. But I think I won't worry about that for now because, well, we are going to require only one board in the game code. I think it just might be a little more confusing. So, okay, we'll get the board array, which is just work the data out of the board query. Let's do component data array, board, and this will just be temp job. And then, so we already know that there's just going to be, well, we only care about the first entry in the board array. And so we can go ahead and just dispose of the board array now. Alright, and so now the num tiles is board array, oh wait, no. Board dot dimensions x, dimensions y. Okay, now that is hard coding in the number of tiles based on the board dimensions. Which, is that something I want to do? Maybe that's not a good idea. Yeah, I think I might be, because if I wanted to say have, I don't know, like a triangle or diamond shaped board just for fun, then I'd have to come back and change this code. Okay, so yeah, let's just get a list of positions and then I'll copy that. And then unpaired tiles, add range positions. Okay, so now we need to, of course, figure out how to get that position. And we could just loop through every tile, probably. If I do that, we could sort of do that multi-threaded. But I think that would probably be a little overkill. Because we want to build up this array. It's always these kind of simple things that tend to be an issue. Let's see. Let's just do it simple, and then later on I can make it multi-threaded if I want to, or even put it in just a single-threaded job. So now I guess these positions are going to need to be okay. I just realized something actually. I guess every tile is going to need to have a position and an image, but we also are going to have an entity, so I'm wondering like if it'd be better to have these as separate components. Yeah, because now I'm kind of thinking ahead, but now if we have more data about the image, it won't need to clutter up this component. Obviously now I'm going to have to go and change some of the code here. So now this will just be tile position and have type of tile image. Only set the tile position. The images will be overwritten soon. Okay, so now that I have that, I can kind of just tile position. I think maybe I'll just switch up a lot of these entries here. And I think this, even though you might think this is a little bit less efficient than using an integer, the tile position only has an integer in it, and I don't really think there's any more overhead for having a wrapper structure around that. So, have this anymore. I'll just comment that out so the error will go away. So what's this complaining about? Oh, there we go. Now down here, so we will have to go ahead and get the integer out of it to assign it to this array. Okay, and now this will need to get tile position and tile image. Not really a big deal. So image.image equals assigned images position. Okay, so that's all taken care of. Okay, so now this native array is easy to get. We'll just get it out of a query, and that will already be set up. So yeah, let's not worry about the board. I know, sorry, I keep going back and forth, but I don't want to have to like rigidly define the board. Sorry, my cats must be fighting a bit. But I don't want to have to rigidly define the number of tiles based on like the shape of the board, because at some point we might want to change how it works. So yeah, now we'll want to watch for both the tile position and the tile image. So, because if for some reason there was an unpositioned tile or a tile without an image, we wouldn't want to try to pair it. Okay, so now we can get tiles equals tile query dot to component data array. Tile position. And the allocator will again be temp job. And one thing you can do here is you can have it give you a job handle, and then it won't fill out the data in the tiles array immediately. It will do it some time later. So if you get this job handle, you can feed it into the tile pair worker job, and then it will run after this data has been filled out. So that just makes this update function go by a little quicker. Out var tile retrieval job retrieval depths, I guess I should call it. Okay, and so we want to combine this input dependencies with this new tile retrieval dependencies, and that's pretty easy to do. You just call job handle dot combine dependencies, and then you pass in any dependencies you want to combine, and Unity will do that for you. Okay, so I think we're finally making some headway here. So positions, just as tiles. Okay, and now we need to worry about this random. And again, we kind of want to keep track of this throughout the entire game. So I need to have some like central object that'll keep track of this Unity sequence or random sequence. I could put it in the database, but that seems kind of weird because the database should hold like assets and things, not like game state. So I think I might make another object to help out. I think I'll just call it... It's pretty much only going to hold this random thing that I can think of for now. So maybe I will just call it random sequences. And that's making this kind of... what's the word? I guess specialized, but that's okay. Which memory, game logic, 4. And this will just be a class that will have a native array. Unity, mathematics, random. This will be the main random. Trying to get it to get Unity collections. So there's something else I want to keep track of here. Basically, like I said, when anything uses this, it will need to have a job dependency. I have a helper class in another project that kind of helps you keep track of both read-only and write-only dependencies for some manually tracked object like this. But the thing is, when you want to get the random sequence, basically to read it is also to write to it, so we really don't have to keep track of both. So I'm just gonna have a job handle, so this will be main random dependencies. Alright, and so now whenever we use this native array, we'll need to be sure to set this dependency and then also have any jobs, I guess not child for this, but use this dependency as well. I guess I can show that. So on the tile pairer, we would want, so since the tile pair worker and the tile image assignment worker both use the random sequence, we want them both to depend on it. So I can, first I gotta get the random sequence object, I guess. Sequences. Okay, and how I'm going to go ahead and use that game object database. So it will actually return a list of random sequences. We'll go ahead and initialize that later on, but so yeah, this is just a custom object I made that helps tracking data that doesn't really fit into the entity system itself. I'll show it later. But yeah, so we need to add another dependency here. Let's just do this. Rand equals randoms 0. Okay, so now we'll pass in this random dependencies to here, and then we can give it the actual main random array. Okay, and so we haven't done this yet. Like, we haven't filled out the image assignment worker yet, but just to make sure I don't forget, to the main random dependencies, we need to set this here, so that way anything that uses the random number sequence will run after the tile image assignment worker. Sorry, looks like I dropped a few frames there. Wish my internet was a bit more consistent, but what can you do? Alright, so now we've filled out all 3 fields for the tile pair worker. Now for the tile image assignment worker, I need to give it these different values. So we have the assigned images, possible images, and then random and pairs. Okay, so for the user components, I did have a possible tile face, and it's just a color. Okay, so one thing I can already tell is that these tile images just use an integer, but it's kind of hard. Well, entities in Unity are unordered, and it's hard to kind of force them to have an order if you use it as an entity. So I'm trying to think the best way to do this. I mean, I guess I could just give these an ID. Probably the best thing to do, so int ID. And then whenever we want to actually get information about the tile face, we'll just have to search through the list of entities to find a matching ID. Which might, well, it is kind of inefficient, but we're not going to have to do that super often, so I think it will be okay. Anyway, so now I need to have a list of possible images. We already have, like, the assigned images is easy. It's just this list that we have waiting around for this purpose. And then possible images, I can get so we have this color. Let's make a couple different components here. So public struct tile face ID. And I'm doing this mostly because if we only care about the IDs, we don't really want to have to pass around all this extra data that will be attached to it. Okay, that's fine. And actually, I won't even deal with this yet because we don't know how we'll store this data. I guess I'll probably just have possible tile color, or maybe even, I think that if you want any display information, you want all of it. So I might just have tile face display info, and that would have the color, and then like some kind of ID for the texture and things like that. Thanks, Harry Man Boobs, for following. I appreciate it. Okay, so I think that's the right way to do it. So now I guess I can, again, just get a list of tile face IDs and pass that into the tile pair object, like how I did with tile position. If I do that, do I want to also just make this native list a list of tile face IDs? I don't think it really matters a whole lot. It'd be something similar. I would just do that. I guess probably it's more future-proof. So I have to do less casting between different data types. Yeah, so now these need to return the correct row or correct type. Oh, that's wrong. Okay. Just had to go switch around some types there. Alright, so now I guess I need to make a query for all different images. Kind of like how I did for the tiles. Private entity query. Image query. I think I'll just copy and paste this code and just modify it as I need it. So here we'll just need the image ID, or what did I call it? Tile face ID. We don't really care about anything else. And images is image query, 2-component data array, and we'll want the tile face. And I was just thinking, I don't know if I like this name anymore, actually, but well, I guess it's fine because it's I was thinking that this would like ID the tile, but it does this ID a specific face, so that's fine. Anyway, sorry for that was a bit of a detour. So now I want to have an image retrieval dependencies. And again, this just makes it so that this array won't be filled out until we actually need it. And I'll combine dependencies here. Okay, so possible images equals images. And what else does it need? It also needs the random sequence. And we already took care of the dependencies here. So we don't really need to pass the main random dependencies again down here because it wouldn't actually make any difference because this already runs after the tile pair worker. So it's kind of already included in this. But I think I might go ahead and add it to fix bugs down the line because we might delete this worker later and then forget to add it down here in this combined dependencies. So I'm just going to be like extra cautious. It doesn't really cause any issues to have it in there twice. Okay, and then it also needs the queue of pairs, which we have right here. Okay, so I think that's all done. Oh yeah, tile pair queue. And then finally we need to schedule this job, store data worker, which is pretty simple. Okay, so this main random dependencies will be set right after the tile assignment worker because this new worker does not use the random sequence, so and we really just pass it the assigned images list, which has just been filled out by the assignment worker. Okay, and since this is a IJob for each, you need to pass it slightly different things in the schedule. You actually need to pass it the job component system, which is just this, and then you pass it any dependencies. And the only thing it depends on is the dependencies from the last job, so that's fine. And then we return the dependencies here. So I think finally finished it. Okay, well let's go ahead and test it. Okay, first I see an error here. The type names or namespace tile could not be found. Yeah, so I just forgot to update this class. What is it? The tile game object creator. Oh yeah, so this creates the entities or the game objects in Unity. So later on we will want to know the tile image, but we don't handle it right now. So I'll just switch these around real quick. Okay, so what's this? The board creator, board dimensions is never assigned to. Oh. I've noticed Unity's been throwing up this error, and it's kind of annoying because it's assigned to by Unity whenever I put the data in there, so I don't think it used to do that. So yeah, those are kind of redundant, or not redundant, but false. Oh, okay, so I didn't get any error. Let's see if anything's been assigned. Oh, well, you know, the reason it's not running is because there's no tiles. I mean, there's no images. Anyway, if we loop through all the tile entities, we can see that tile image is still set to 0. So I need to add in some images. I think I'll just create a quick test object to deal with that. And here, this seems fine. So I'm just going to create, let's see, if we have, oh well, why don't I just add another field for the number of images to create. This code really shouldn't go in here because this is kind of test code, but we'll delete it whenever we actually have images, so. I less than dummy images. So yeah, I'm just gonna create an entity real quick. Oh, I guess I should create the archetype. Equals world, entity manager, create archetype, and this be a type of board ID or tile face ID. So first I need to get a handle on the entity. Oh yeah, it's gonna complain that that is already used up here, which is just doubly showing us that we shouldn't have this code here, but just for testing. So image archetype, and then world entity manager, set component data, tile face ID, image entity, and then new tile face ID. And why don't we be a little tricky here and multiply the I by 2 just so we can test to make sure that this ID, like if we ever excuse me, see an odd ID, that we know that something is wrong with the tile pairer. My voice needs to get used to these 2-hour streams again. Alright, so let's go ahead and play and see what happens now that we actually have images. Oh. Well, we don't have any because I still set this to 0. So we have 16, so we'll need 8 images to pair each tile, so I'll just go ahead and create that. Okay, did it actually run? Oh, we got an error. Index was out of range, must be non-negative. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, a lot of times with jobs you can't double click on the error to take you to it. But if that happens, you can just kind of look down until you see a link, and then you can click on that and it will bring you to the... Oh right, so I forgot to actually create this random object, so let's just do that real quick. Just random sequence initializer. And it's going to be a lot like the database initializer, so I think I'll start by copying that code so I don't have to write it all again. That reminds me, did I add the update in group tag to the tile pairer? Oh, why is this in mono behaviors? It scared me for a second, I thought I accidentally deleted it. Okay. Oh, but I didn't want to close it. Okay, yeah, so I forgot to tell it to update in a group. Okay. So I had to refresh. I'm not sure. Like, my first instinct is to put it in the simulation system group because it runs... It's kind of more like game code, but when I think about it again, it actually isn't game code. It's kind of just running right away to update the tiles. So I think I'll keep it initialization, but I need to make sure it runs after the board initializer. So update after type of, or yeah, call it the simple board initializer. I don't know. Bit of a misnomer now, probably, but. Okay, we got a bit sidetracked there. So this, I need, yeah, we don't have to deal with any assets in here. This will just be random sequences. And then main random will just be a new collection, length 1 and persistent. I'm going to go ahead and use the collections. Oh right, I don't need a semicolon there. Add the random to the game logic database. And then obviously the main random, we have to set something in there. So it depends on what I want to have the seed. I think, well, you could either have it constant if I wanted it to be consistent every test run, but I think I'll actually do it based on the millisecond. And now we'll get a different seed every millisecond. Oh yeah, I think it actually wants it to be... Oh, wait, what is this? What's wrong with this? Not convert. Oh. It's like I can't convert from an integer to an unsigned integer. We'll just force it to do that. And then the job handle in here, we can just set as 0, which is, it'll be, okay, that doesn't actually work. I think there's a way, I forget what the default is. I think if you do like default job handle, this means it has no dependencies. Oh right, and there's one other thing I forgot. So here, since we have a native array. Oh, sorry, I think I'm about to sneeze. So if you have a native array, obviously we need to destroy it ourselves, especially since I marked it as persistent here. You might think that Unity would clear out native arrays after you exit out, after you like stop play mode in the editor. It actually doesn't, so it will complain to you, and you'll notice that Unity will continue using more and more memory. Obviously this native array is super small, but probably a good idea to fix it. So we'll just call for each. Oh, spelled that wrong. And game logic database get random sequences. So we're obviously always going to have one and only one, but we might as well just future-proof this. So first of all, before we dispose of the native array, we have to make sure that any job using these dependencies is done, so we can just call complete on them. And then we'll dispose the native array. And this actually causes the main thread to pause and wait for any jobs to complete, and then it keeps running. Sorry, that sneeze made me have to blow my nose, so 1 second. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, the weather keeps on changing back and forth here, so... And whenever that happens, my allergies always get worse. When I was younger, I used to think it was just the temperature changing, but I've read that it's actually because like every cold or hot front brings in allergens from other places or something like that. But anyway, I think this is all set up. So when I start it, let's see if we get another error. I wouldn't be surprised because I'm sure I've made some mistake in that tile pairing code. Oh, yep. So one other issue with the data-oriented design is it sometimes you have to do a lot of work before you can test it. Like, I couldn't really test anything in the tile pairer until I wrote basically all this code, so I always expect a few bugs. And then other times when you get an error, then Unity is going to complain that a native collection has not been disposed because it never actually got to the code that disposes it. So, for example, if we had an error here, then we'd never get to dispose, and so it would throw an error. But in these jobs, you can't have a try-catch because it's not... I'll actually need to check that again, but I think it's not really it's not supported by what Unity calls their burst compiler, which is a really fast compiler for jobs. So you kind of just have to live with it. But which reminds me, this code's not using the burst compiler right now, but that's okay because we're debugging. So Let's see. Anyway, so index 0 is out of range at higher tile pairer 139. So let's see what code that is. Okay, so it's saying that this, well, probably because of the assigned image list isn't long enough. Actually, oh, it is a native array. Let's see. But I made it a native list up here. But actually, the assigned images doesn't need to be a list. It can be just be an array. Okay, well that's interesting. I guess Unity goes ahead and casts a native list to a native array for you. Yeah, but since since assigned images can actually be an array, I don't have to keep it around. So yeah, this will let me show off something else. So we know the number of tiles, and every tile is going to have an array. Actually, we don't know the number of tiles because this tile retrieval dependencies was supposed to run first. Let's see. There's ways to get around it, but I feel like... Oh, wait. No, we do know the number. We just... Okay. Yeah, I forgot. The length of the array in the query is actually known immediately because obviously Unity has to know how long or how many entities are in the query before it can call update. So that's fine, but it's just the data hasn't been filled yet. So anyway, so we know how many tiles there are, so we can go ahead and create the assigned images array. Images equals new native array tile face ID. Okay, and the length is tiles length, and again, I have to have temp job, and you can actually make this a little bit more efficient by just telling Unity that they can just give us uninitialized memory because we're not going to read anything until we write the entire array. So yeah, you can't convert an array to a list, but you can convert a list to an array. It's fine. Okay, so now obviously we create this array up here, but we can't dispose of it here because we gotta wait until these jobs run. So again, Unity did create a handy little feature here where you can tag any native array with this deallocate on job completion, and it will automatically dispose of the array when this job's finished. So that takes care of that issue. Alright, so let's play again and see what happens. Okay, so it's giving me warnings that some job is leaking memory, but it probably is actually not a job leaking memory. I think it's left over from that error we got before. But let's go ahead and look here and see if the tiles have been assigned images. Okay, well, this is the tile face ID, so yeah, 0, 2, 4, 6, 10. Yeah, so we have 8, so the last one is 14 because it starts at 0. And then the board's 4x4. Tile images, okay. Well, let's see. So, well, right here we have 3 assigned image 0, which isn't right. They also seem to not actually be random because they're kind of sequential, which tells me that the random number sequence is probably messed up. Let's see which. What image did it not choose? Because... Okay, for some reason it didn't choose image 2, which is interesting. There might be a logic error as well, because obviously it assigned 2 things, image 0, and then everything else is just sequential. Okay, so let's try... Yeah, I'm just gonna ignore this leak for now, because I think it would go away if I restarted Unity, which I probably will do after we fix these other errors, just to make sure, but... So, I guess let's fix or check the random first. So I think what's happening is it uses this random, but it doesn't assign it back to the array. So every time it's basically just using or getting the same value out of it. Which is a little annoying, but it's just how structures are. I think we can fix it by doing something like this, and then store the value back into it. Let's see if this works. If it doesn't, I might try something else. Because this does kind of seem not needed, but I think that the random sequences were incorrect. Okay, so let's look again. Okay, I see. So now they are randomized. You can see 2, 12, 14. At that time it picked 2, actually. So maybe it was just a random sequence the whole time that was messing it up. So I'm actually gonna grab a piece of paper and write down these images to see if there's any duplicates. I don't need to write it. Let's use this. Okay, so we have 2. Let's actually just look for more than one 2. 12, 14. There was another 2. Is there a third? No. Actually, is there any 0? I don't think I saw 0. No. Okay, so what is duplicated? 2 6s. Oh, there was a third 6. So 6 was duplicated for some reason. Okay. Well, first I'm going to get rid of Unity because or reload Unity because I actually want to use the console, and it's going to be a pain with it screaming at me about that undisposed list. Oh wow. Time's gone by quick. Hopefully I can fix this up before the stream ends. Alright. I'm just gonna play it once to make sure that that leak is gone. Okay, so that's interesting. So, since the leak is still there, that means that it's something I've done in the code. Let me see here. So, unpaired tiles I create and dispose. Unused images I create and dispose. It's native array. Native queue isn't created every time. It's just cleared. Assigned images is disposed here. Oh, these tiles and images. Of course, I forgot to dispose of them. So when are they last used? So tiles is last used here. Or that's a wrong thing, but possible images. So we'll want to just deallocate that there, and then positions will deallocate here. Okay, so that should fix it. I might have to restart Unity again to get it to stop throwing errors, but let's just see. Okay, well at least I didn't get the 2 red errors, but it's still giving me warnings. But I think it's just from those arrays that were left over from the last job, or the last run. I'll just restart it once more to check. It's restarting pretty quickly, so... Alright, let's try it one more time. Yeah, you really need to try to test it pretty often, because I've noticed trying to find out these disposal bugs can be pretty tricky. So you want to try to make sure that you only have a small amount of code to look for. But anyway, so that's all fixed. There's probably still a lot of 6s here. Oh, I saw 0 that time. Oh, right, because it's different every time. Okay, so that's gonna... I think what I need to do is write some code that makes sure that the tiles are correct. Maybe, or we don't really have to write code. Maybe what I need to do is just tie the colors, or like color the actual squares based on the images, and we can use that to test. Yeah, because then we can just look at a glance which ones are different. But I have less than 5 minutes, so I don't know if I can really get much done. Let's just get some of the basics. So, I think... Let's see. Let's just make tile face display info, because again, I think if you want to know any of this information, you'll want to know all of it. So well, actually, this will just be the texture, so it'll have a color and then some kind of texture later on. Yeah, so for now we don't actually download anything, so I want to be able to give the game my own textures. So let's make another mono behavior. This will just be in fact, this will be for testing, so let's add a whole new folder that I'll just use for code that I know will be deleted later, or is for testing. So let's call this image, or I guess I should stop calling it image, tile face test texture creator. Name logic for... Oh yeah, so I don't have this namespace yet, so I gotta type it out. Yeah, this will just be a mono behavior, and I'll give it serialized fields, private. I don't want to actually use textures yet because I'm not sure how we'll store the textures in the game. I guess that probably is something, that'll probably be the next thing we do, because I think we'll want to download users soon, but Okay, so I guess for now I'll just have images, and then I'll just give the colors. Okay, so that means I can get this code out of here, which I already knew was not gonna stay. Okay, so oh yeah, so I need to get the namespaces I need. Now does Unity have a way? Because I'd like to just pick a hue based on this num images, but I'm not sure if there's any way to do that. Saturation value or saturation value. I'll need to look into that actually, so I think I'll just keep a note. Let's see, so what have we done today? We're still testing this. Oh, but I want to grab this for later. Okay, so make sure no duplicates and all images are used. So we'll have a test object to assign colors to images and color the test cubes, and then I'll need to somehow get code to create hue saturation value color, which I guess kind of overkill for this testing, but it'll just make me feel better. Okay, so that will start with this, I guess, Wednesday. Tomorrow is going to be the first Tutorial Tuesday, which I'm pretty excited about. I've been working on it over the weekend, and Tutorial Tuesdays, I mean, they're not going to be that much different than a normal stream, except it will be a standalone project trying to tackle some question that either from the community or that I've just seen people ask about, which if you do have a request, you can go to my Twitch channel, and I have a forum that you can request something that you'd like to be covered, and of course if I can do it within 2 hours, then I'll cover it. So yeah, feel free to go and request that if you'd like. You can see it either in my Twitch channel or the video description. But yeah, tomorrow we'll be doing how to do a full screen transition effect. Think like entering into a Pokemon battle in the older Pokemon games, that kind of thing. So it's going to show off post-processing, then lightweight render pipeline, a little bit of shader code, and then just tying it all together. So I think it should be pretty fun. And then we'll continue with this on Wednesday. But yeah, thanks everybody for coming by and watching and chatting. I really appreciate it. I know I'm just restarting streams, so hopefully I can try and pick up the momentum that I lost from my break. But yeah, I appreciate everybody coming by. And again, please feel free to leave any comment about the stream, especially like audio quality. I'd like to do all I can to try and fix it. I know I can't really fix the dropped frames, unfortunately, but yeah, if something about the bitrate is wrong too, feel free to let me know. But I guess that's it from me for today. If you'd like to chat with me throughout the day, I have a Discord, which you can get a link in the channel description or video description, and you can follow me on social media if you'd like to know when I go live. And I think that's about it. So I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.